the structure of a fifth chord and how to play one. Fifth chords are used a lot, and you'll come across them in all genres of music. And they're most recognisable by their more powerful sound, and because of this they're quite often called power chords, especially when they're in their bar chord form. In this lesson we'll take a look at the structure and the theory behind the fifth chord. However, at the end of the lesson I'll also have some practical exercises on playing fifth chords and improving their fluidity. So if you want to jump onto that, if you already know the theory, then you can do using the chapters. But to start with, I'll get straight into the structure of the fifth chord. To follow and understand this video, you really need some background information. So if you haven't already, I recommend you watching the videos on how to play the major scale, how to play the minor scale, and the structure of the major and minor chord. And once you've watched those, you'll have a good basic foundation to understand this video. I'll place a link down below in the description to those lessons, as well as a link to a playlist that contains every lesson you need to be able to understand chord theory correctly. The structure of the fifth chord. Hopefully you'll remember the structure of the major and the minor chords, but I'll just quickly run through that anyway. Here we have a major scale and a minor scale. And if we take the first, third and fifth note of the major scale, this creates the major triad, and this is what the major chord is made up from. In exactly the same way, if you take the first, third and fifth note of the minor scale, you get the minor triad, and this is what the minor chord is made up from. Now, the fifth chord only consists of two notes, and this is called a dyad. So if we take a look at the C major scale again, the dyad would consist of the first note of the C major scale and the fifth note of the C major scale, which means the dyad of the C major scale would be C and G. And in a similar way, if we were to take the dyad of the A minor scale, we take the first note and the fifth note. So the first note of the A minor scale is A, and the fifth note of the A minor scale is E. So the dyad for A minor scale is A and E. Now you'll notice I used the C major scale and the A minor scale here. However, it's important to point out that there's no such thing as a major or minor fifth chord. It's always just a fifth chord. And the reason for this is that the note that makes a difference between a major chord and a minor chord is the third, and we're not using the third. And I'll demonstrate why the third note of the scale makes such a difference now. You can see here we've got two A scales, one's the A major and one's the A minor. And the A major has got 3 sharps in it, whereas the A minor has got no sharps in it. And if we take a look at the triads of both these scales, you'll see that the A major triad has got an A, C sharp and E, whereas the A minor triad has got an A, C, E. So the only difference between the two triads is the third, which is the C and the C sharp. So if we were to remove these, there would be no difference in the two chord structures. And this is how it is with fifth chords, because you're only using the first note of the scale and the fifth note of the scale. To demonstrate this, here's a first position or E string rooted bar chord in the major form and in the minor form. And if you look at these chords, you'll notice there's only one note that makes a difference between the two chords, and that's on the G string, and that is the third note of the scale. Now, if I highlight in red the notes we play to play a fifth chord, you can see we don't actually play the G string, or actually the B or the E. So the shape we get from the major chord and from the minor chord is identical. And you can see from this, there's obviously no need to name the chord major fifth or minor fifth, as that's completely irrelevant. You just call it the fifth chord. And to confirm this and show it's not a fluke, here's a second position or A string rooted bar chord shape. And you can see the only difference between the major shape and the minor shape is the note on the B string. And that note on the B string is the third note of the scale. And in just the same way as we did with the first position bar chord, when you play the fifth chord, you don't actually play that B string or the top E string. So the minor fifth chord and the major fifth chord are both identical. So there's no such thing as a minor or major fifth. It's just a fifth chord. And once you become aware that the structure of the fifth chord only consists of two notes, it's clear why with most of the open chords you have to mute so many notes. And you'll also notice that in two of the chords, the C5 and the G5, you have to mute notes in the middle of the chord. So I'll show you how to do that now. How to play the G5 and the C5. And we'll take a look at the G5 first, because I want to have a bit of a moan about this chord. And I think this is the most misrepresented chord out there. And many websites and many teachers and even the official Guns N' Roses tab book get this chord wrong. Now, here's the wrong version. I'll give you 10 seconds to see if you can work out what's wrong with it. Now, if you said that the second fret on the A string shouldn't be played, then give yourself a pat on the back, because that is the B, and that's the third note of the G major scale. And if you play that note, then this is no longer a G5, it's a G add 5. And as we discussed earlier in this video, the structure of the G5 should just consist of the tonic, which is G, and the fifth note of the scale, which is D. And because of this, we have to mute the A string or the B note. And there's two popular ways of doing this. The first one is to allow the finger that's playing the G on the bottom E string to overlap the A string slightly, so it's muting it. Now, the second way, which is one I quite often do, is to play the full chord like a G add 5. However, lift the first finger slightly so that you're not pressing on the B, you're just muting the A string. Now, this obviously doesn't sound very nice as I'm demonstrating the technique. However, when you strum the guitar, you can't hear the click at all. And obviously, if you are arpeggiating or finger picking, you just don't play that particular note. And you might be thinking, well, there's very little difference between when I play that B and don't play the B. But that slight difference can really stand out if it doesn't work with the harmony and the melody in the tune you're playing. And when you first start playing chords like this one, it's actually quite difficult to mute that note whilst allowing the strings you need to ring cleanly. So practice it, because it's a good discipline. Right, after learning the G5, I'm sure yourself you could work out how to play the C5. However, I'll show you anyway. And my favourite way is actually just to play a normal C and then put my little finger on the 3rd fret of the top E string. And then I just lift the 2nd finger slightly so that it mutes the D string so it won't ring. And as we did with the G, you could actually allow the finger that was fingering the 3rd fret of the A string to just hang over the string slightly so it mutes the D string. However, this again, it'll take a little bit of practice to get it right. Right, the last part of this lesson will actually be a lesson I did a long time ago, but I've updated it and put it on here because it's very relevant. And it's how to play the E string rooted and A string rooted barred 5th chords, or power chords. These chords go under several names, and the most common one is probably power chords. However, you sometimes hear them referred to as rock chords and as 5th chords. Theoretically, the correct term should be the 5th chords. However, before we go any further, it's worth mentioning why they're called power chords and how they've got that name. When you play a power chord, you get that distinctive rock sound, especially if you put a bit of distortion on it. However, it's worth pointing out that power chords aren't always used in what you'd call rock music. For example, Everybody Hurts by REM, which couldn't really be described as a rock piece, however, it does include 5th chords. Now, you'll hear if I play the power chord or the 5th chord for a G, and then I play a full G major in the bar chord position, the power chord definitely has a more powerful sound, even though it consists of fewer notes. Let's hear that again, but this time with distortion. The reason the correct name for a power chord is a 5th chord is because, really, it only consists of 2 notes. And those notes would be the root of the scale, in this case G, and the 5th note of the scale, in this case the D. So if we break down this chord, you can see the first note of the chord is the G root. And then if we skip a string and go straight on to the D string, you'll see you're playing another G an octave up. In the middle between these 2 notes is the 5th note of the G major scale, and that is the D. And you can work that out. 1 is G, 2 is A, 3 is B, 4 is C, and 5 is D. And this is why it's called a G5, because it only consists of the G and the 5. And we've already demonstrated why the 5th chord is called a power chord, because it has a far more powerful sound than a full major or minor chord. And the reason for this is that the frequencies of the notes in the 5th chord add together perfectly to create a good resonance, and this gives it more power. If we add the 3rd, which is what we would do to play a major or a minor chord, the frequency of the 3rd works against the other 2 notes in the chord and therefore reduce the power of it. So if you're looking for a good, powerful, rock sounding chord, the 5th chord is the one to choose. Right, let's take a look at how to play the G 5th chord. The first thing I need to point out when you're learning to play the chords is the fact that you only play 3 strings. Therefore, one of the most important things you need to learn when playing these chords is plectrum accuracy, or finger accuracy if you're not using a pick. If you play too many notes, you'll destroy the sound by creating a discord. So therefore, if you're not too accurate with the plectrum, it's probably better to aim for 2 notes rather than 3. And then if you overshoot, you'll just create a perfect chord. Whereas if you just strike the 2 notes, it will still sound like a good power chord. This is still a bit of a cop-out though. It's better for you to practice the accuracy of your plectrum, so you get a good power chord every time. When playing these bar fifth chords, there's 2 ways of doing it. You can either play them with 3 fingers, that's the 1st, 3rd and 4th finger, or with 2 fingers, the 1st and 3rd. I personally prefer the 2-finger method because you've got less fingers to get into place, making them a little bit quicker. However, practice both methods to find out which way works for you and which way you get to the chord more quickly and get a more accurate result with. And then stick to that, because you don't want to split your practice time by playing the chord in 2 different ways. You might find that whilst playing the 5th chords, your fingers overlap onto the strings that you shouldn't be playing. However, don't worry about this, as long as you get good contact with the strings you should be playing. In fact, some guitarists purposely overlap their fingers onto the open strings in order to prevent them from ringing, and this helps keep the guitar quiet or prevent feedback when you're playing with heavy distortion or a very loud amplifier. Once you can play this G5th bar chord, you can play most of them, and that's because of the way the chords work. They get their name from the root of the chord, which in this case is the 3rd fret of the bottom E string. Therefore, the 3rd fret of the bottom E string is the G, hence G5. So, if we were to play exactly the same pattern in the 5th fret, we would have an A5. And this is because the A is the 5th fret of the bottom E string. As another example, if you were to play the same pattern in the 1st fret, you'd be playing F5. And that's because the 1st fret of the bottom E string is F. So, by learning the names of the notes on the bottom E string, you'll be learning all the 5th chords that can relate to those notes. And I'm sure you'll agree that's very powerful. Let's see and hear that for the main notes up to the 8th fret. Finding the 5th chords from the names of the notes doesn't have to stop here either. You can do exactly the same thing on the A string. However, this time you're playing the 3 notes from the A onwards, so it takes a little more plectrum accuracy. However, here you can see you can play the B, C, D, E and F if we go up to the 8th fret. So let's see and hear that done. If you look at the name of the notes from the 1st fret to the 8th fret using the bottom E string and A string, you'll notice you've got the complete set from F to F. You can also find the sharps and flats by simply taking the chord up a fret for a sharp or down a fret for a flat, remembering that down is going towards the nut or the headstock, and up is going towards where you pick or strum. I've done a far more detailed video on how to remember the names of the notes on the guitar, and I'll put the link to that below in the description. To encourage you to practice these chords, it's worth me pointing out that there's quite a number of bands that have written songs that literally just consist of 5th chords. A couple of bands I can mention would be Nirvana or White Stripes, and White Stripes in particular produced Button to Button and Seven Nation Army completely on 5th chords. And this is just a small fraction of the bands and tunes. I could list them for ages, but this is enough to make you realise that these chords are really powerful, and once you memorise them, they'll open the door to lots of interesting music. Right, let's try a few exercises to practice these 5th chords. You'll find the tab if you need it at ebooks4guitar.com, and it's month 11, week 1. In the following exercises, you'll notice that some of the chords are underlined. These chords are 2nd position or A-rooted bar chords, but you should be able to see that from the tablature. Exercise 1. Looking at the first line of this exercise, you'll notice all the chords are in the 5th fret, and you're going between the A5th, which is an E string rooted bar chord, and the D5th, which is the A string rooted bar chord. You might also have noticed that there are some single notes being played. However, these are part of the chord, so when you play these, don't remove the shape of the chord. Therefore, when you're playing this exercise, you should be able to hold the chord shape all the way through at least the first line. So let's look at the first line now. Let's see and hear that played again. With the second line of this exercise, again you can maintain the shape throughout. With this one though, there's more changes in position. You start on the 3rd fret and work your way up and end on the 2nd fret in the 2nd position. So let's hear the second line now. Let's see and hear that played again. You'll notice with these exercises, I'm playing the examples without distortion, and that's so you can hear clearly what I'm doing. However, if you want to practice with distortion, that's fine. Also, it's worth noting, just because I'm using an electric guitar doesn't mean you have to do these on an electric guitar. They sound just as good with an acoustic guitar. Right, let's hear and see the whole of exercise 1. Let's see and hear that again, but this time, if you can, try playing along with it. You'll notice with this exercise, and in fact with all these exercises, if you can, try to hold the chord shape. That way you can get between the chords far more quickly. However, it will take a bit of practice before you can do it. Exercise 2. Exercise 2 only consists of one line. However, watch out because there's a repeat. The chords are fairly straightforward as well, in that you start on the 5th fret and you work down a fret each time. However, you go from the 1st position to the 2nd position, back to the 1st position and back to the 2nd position, and then repeat. You'll also notice in the last 2 bars a bow over the 2 A5s. This joins them both together, so you just play one A5 and let it hold for the whole 2 bars. Let's hear the whole exercise with repeats. Let's see and hear that played again, noticing that there's 2 beats between each chord. And if you feel like you can play along, you could try playing along with it. Exercise 3. This exercise looks the most complicated, however it isn't really. If you look at the first 2 bars and then the second 2 bars, you'll notice they're the same thing. So the first line is fairly straightforward. Let's see and hear the first line played. Let's see and hear that played again. The second line of exercise 3 is very simple. We simply play the G5 8 times and then move the chord up by 2 frets to finish on the A5. However, let's hear that done anyway. Right, let's see and hear the entire of exercise 3 being played. And if you think you can play along with it, have a try. Let's see and hear that played again. The metronome speed used in the exercises in this tutorial was 120 beats per minute. However, you don't have to practice at that speed. You can practice more slowly or more quickly, depending on your own preference. If you find you have to practice more slowly, you can build up the speed over time. Now, because this particular video was made of 2 different lessons from 2 different books, I've merged those and created a new free ebook that you can download from www.ebooks4guitar.com, and I'll put 2 links to this particular ebook. One, if you click on the lessons and then go to the chord theory, and you'll find the link there underneath this video. And for the second link, if you go to the lessons, then go to year 1, month 11, week 1. And I'll also put a link to this free ebook there as well. And it's well worth downloading the ebook, because if you want to practice these exercises, it's far easier to do if you can print out the tablature and have it there in front of you. Thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, please like, subscribe and hit the bell icon, and then you'll be notified when I upload new videos. Thanks again for watching.